Is there any hope for Kenny Payne? As we saw at the end of Season 4, he embraced the creed of Cobra Kai to get revenge on his bullies. Now, he seems even more brainwashed by Terry Silver's teachings. As we've seen with countless students in the past, it may take some time before Payne realizes the errors of his ways. This is why Kenny is still corrupted. Let's talk about his rage, his strained relationship with Robby and rivalry with Anthony, his match against Hawk, and more. Let's first recap what we know about Kenny so far. Since this is a continuation of my previous video, How Kenny Became Corrupted, I'm only going to cover the events of Kenny's arc in Season 5. Feel free to skip ahead to avoid the recap, but be warned, you may miss some important details later on in the video. Now studying primarily under Silver, Kenny continues to use his aggression and helps promote Cobra Kai's flagship location, while continuing to antagonize Anthony LaRusso. He starts a new rivalry with someone he used to be afraid of, Hawk, and is disappointed to hear his former mentor has formally left Cobra Kai. After attempting to attack Hawk, he's hit with a devastating elbow strike, but the fight is stopped after Robby and Miguel intervene. Payne still continues to bully Anthony with the help of Kyler and friends, and while misunderstanding the lesson at first of leader and a follower, Silver manipulates him into becoming a brainwashed leader, and he's successful when Kenny lands a strike on Sensei Odell. After helping with Cobra Kai's demonstration to the Sakai Takai board, Terry takes Kenny under his wing again by teaching him the silver bullet, which he uses in his fight against Hawk, winning the fight thanks to another ref his sensei bribed, and because the bullet temporarily incapacitates Hawk. While Robby tries to convince Payne and the rest of Cobra Kai to leave, Kenny makes good on Silver's orders and attacks Anthony and the rest of Miyagi-Fang when they raid Cobra Kai. He gains the upper hand against Robby because the latter refuses to fight him, but is stopped by Miguel and learns the truth about Silver. Kenny is the first to renounce Cobra Kai's ways, but still needs some time to talk to Robby. Let's first talk about why Kenny is still corrupted. This is due to a few reasons, so we'll talk about the first one, not having a mentor who has his best interests at heart. This is a common problem in the Miyagi-verse and also one shared by former Cobra Kai alumni such as Johnny Lawrence, Daniel LaRusso, Tori Nichols, Miguel Diaz, and Hawk. As Silver talks about in Bad Eggs, Kenny typically followed the advice of everyone he looked up to at one point. His father, his brother Sean, Robby, and now Kyler. Park is seen ordering Kenny around throughout the season, notably at the water park and during training exercises before the leader and follower exercise. Still not knowing what to do, he asks his sensei for advice, who tells him to stop asking me and anyone else that question. As I pointed out in my Why Terry Silver is Still Terrifying video, although it was made to seem like Terry was empowering Kenny, this was still him manipulating and gaslighting Kenny, as he did imply that Kyler was the leader at first, and setting up this ploy to get Kenny to become loyal to Cobra Kai no matter what, as he was exceeding every other male student at that point. In a twisted way, Silver is now Kenny's Miyagi and listens to everything that he says. This is also why Payne is so aggressive towards Miyagi-Fang, on top of Robby defecting to this dojo, as he mean mugs Hawk, calls out Robby for teaching Anthony, follows his sensei's order to show his former mentor and his friends no mercy, and is seen calling the shots when Miyagi-Fang raids Cobra Kai. Silver's influence is present throughout many points of the season. Kenny purposely gives Hawk a flat tube so Cobra Kai could win by cheating, which is ironic as he's unaware his sensei rigged the tournament until the end of the season, using his aggression, going for extra damage in a fight, using the Cobra Kai headbutt, and feigning fear at an opponent. The second reason, which is related to not having a good mentor, is that Kenny conveniently forgot that it was Robby, not Cobra Kai, who helped him in the first place. As I talked about in my previous video, Payne started to lose sight of this when Silver started teaching in Cobra Kai, and became more focused on aggression than defending himself, even when Robby tried to tell him otherwise. As I'll talk about more in detail later on, this is why Kenny got so hurt when he saw Anthony being trained by Robby, feeling a sense of betrayal in a similar manner to how Silver felt betrayed by Kreese. The third reason, and one of the most obvious ones, is why he learned karate in the first place, to get back at Anthony. Although one could say he accomplished this in Season 4, it was clear that even after being stopped by Robby, he wasn't going to let things go that easily. I'll elaborate more on this in the next section, but what he did was way worse than what Anthony did to him, and every time throughout the season, Kenny had the upper hand. He had no more reason to fight Anthony, but as Chosen said, rivalries die slow deaths. Let's also talk about Kenny's relationship with both Robby and Anthony. These relationships are closely intertwined as again, Anthony's bullying of Kenny is what caused the latter to reach out to Robby in the first place. Payne is in denial at first when hearing from Kyler that Robby is leaving the dojo and begins to follow his lead in the meantime, confused at hearing this revelation. When seeing that Anthony is at the same water park, Payne refuses to hear him out and accept his apology, getting Kyler and friends to hold down Anthony so Kenny can kick him in the water. He feels justified and is glad Kyler is praising him for this, but this still concerns Robby, who tells Tori how he's feeling, arguing that this isn't a good place for Kenny. When finally talking to Robby again for the first time, Kenny is disappointed to hear that Robby is quitting the dojo, even getting aggressive when his former mentor tries to talk some sense into him. He thinks everything that he's learned up to this point, being hurt by Robby in the tournament match, becoming stronger, is what makes him who he is today, and doesn't regret any of it. Payne doesn't interact with either of the two again until Bad Eggs, where he forces Anthony to either take the Cobra Kai gi or, in probably one of the most dastardly acts on the show yet, feel the pain by literally becoming a shithead. In Taikai, Kenny runs into Robby again, this time furious at the thought of Robby training Anthony. He attempts to use the logic that Keen is training his bully, unaware that Robby knows he's continuing to pursue revenge in the first place. Despite being asked to hash things out, Kenny is completely brainwashed by Silver at this point, subtly threatening Robby as he gets ready for his match. In Head of the Snake, Payne yet again strikes down Anthony, possibly implying himself and or Kyler as the contact for Mitch's betrayal, and calls Robby a liar. Kenny even attempts to fight Robby, who refuses, and then hits him with the silver bullet while calling two other students to gang up on him. This all ceases the moment he finds out that Silver did in fact lie, bribing the ref during the All Valley, deeply upsetting Kenny, who once again is without someone to look up to. Robby attempts to reconcile, but it seems Kenny needs more time. As I mentioned in my Season 6 teaser breakdown analysis, it seems that Kenny is going to fight Robby and Miguel with his brother Sean, but at some point will join Miyagi Fang, and is going to hopefully squash his rivalry with Anthony. Many people have been wanting me to address this for some time now, so let's talk about it. Why Kenny won against Hawk? First, let's talk about the silver bullet and how legitimate it is as a technique. As far as points, at least within the realm of the Miyagi-verse, it is a legal punch from what we can assume. What makes it so effective is that it targets the solar plexus. If hit hard enough, it can knock the wind out of someone, as seen what it does to Hawk. In fact, in the original Karate Kid film, Daryl Vidal hits Don, another Cobra Kai member, in the same spot with a kick. Notice how also Terry demonstrates the strike itself. He bends his fingers back, not necessarily just to imitate a gun, but to add extra force to the strike itself. I learned this from Yusuke Nagano when he reacted to the episode Miyagi-Do from Season 3. He specifically points out that in some karate styles, they will bend their finger back like that for certain strikes to poke the muscle. The solar plexus is also sometimes targeted in other sports, boxing for example, and can be seen winning those hit in that spot pretty quickly. For those of you gamers out there who have played any of the Yakuza games, Kiryu Kazuma uses a similar technique called the Tiger Drop, a counter move that targets the solar plexus and does insane amount of damage even to bosses. This is why even Robby was caught off guard by the silver bullet, as hitting that spot is just as effective as hitting another weak point on the body. You're gonna go down. Silver even attempted to use this move on Daniel, and LaRusso was smart to block it, as Terry would have turned the tide immediately. The second point I'd like to point out why Kenny beat Hawk is because of Kenny's training. It's obvious that Kenny learned karate much later than others such as Miguel, Hawk, Robby, and Kyler. However, one of the advantages that Kenny had is that he was learning two styles at once when training under Robby, which was both Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. Now yes, Miyagi Fang was also undergoing the same type of training in most cases, but remember the dojo split not long after, and only certain students like Miguel, Sam, and Hawk took advantage of this by using another style outside of their own. Another advantage Kenny had was that he was a quick learner. The fact he was able to incorporate two different styles at once and become one of Cobra Kai's top fighters both under Kreese's dojo and Silver's dojo is no small feat. He also learned the silver bullet overnight, which could be considered the dark side of the force's crane technique, relatively quickly. Does this mean he's better than say Hawk, Robby, and Miguel? Not at all, but it made him more formidable than someone like Kyler attempting to fight any one of those again in Season 5, which he did, but ultimately still lost to two of them plus Dimitri. The third reason why Kenny won is that Hawk went easy on him. As we saw in the water park, once Payne struck Moskowitz, the latter quickly shifted momentum and struck his knee with his elbow, just like Johnny did to Daniel, and the same move Kenny would do to Hawk in their match. Robby asked Hawk not to go too hard on him, and the latter listened until the illegal strike, where he was ready to go on offense. However, because of Kenny's Miyagi-Do training from Robby and the silver bullet being a counter move, at least 2 out of the 3 times we've seen it used, it was too late. Had Hawk gone on the offensive earlier, he more than likely would have won the match. Of course, as we know, the fourth reason is that the ref was bribed by Silver again and was biased. Had he removed the point for the strike, or at worst case disqualified Kenny, and awarded Eli the point as Kenny was still in bounds as far as contact, the scoring for the fight would have been different, whether tied 1-1 or Hawk winning by disqualification. And the fifth reason why, it makes sense from a writing perspective. Let's say Robby was the one chosen to fight instead of Hawk. Because of his refusal to fight Kenny, despite him wanting to stop Cobra Kai, as evidenced in Head of the Snake, Robby would have been unfocused like Miguel, and also in the same way he was in his match with Hawk. He would have lost, which also would have been surprising considering how easily he was able to defeat Kenny in the All Valley tournament. His refusal to fight Kenny was knowing he could beat him, and he didn't want to fight his former student. Now let's say Miguel was in that position. I think people would have been way more upset at that decision because as we saw at the end of the season, Miguel was fully healed from his back strain and in top fighting shape again since season 2. Cobra Kai needed to gain entry to set up Cobra Kai season 6, as we now know it's going to be Kreese's and Kim's Cobra Kai entering instead of Silver's. It's similar to how Cobra Kai was able to exist because of Johnny's plea to the All Valley Committee. The dojo was eventually gained back by Kreese and Silver, who used it to enter the following year's All Valley. It also further emphasizes that Silver is willing to pull any dirty tactics so he can ensure Cobra Kai's survival. Outside of this, I think they had no choice but to go with Hawk, and while it sucked to see the All Valley champion lose a match so quickly after his title win, people tend to forget that Hawk lost all of his major fights in season 2 and still bounced back. Even Miguel lost fights in season 1 and bounced back. In fact, he's probably the most protected character in Cobra Kai in terms of writing. Not to mention, we're talking about a universe where a 2-time All Valley champion who studied karate for at least 4 years was dethroned by someone who trained for a month and a half, so I think some liberties can be taken here and there. Here are my final thoughts on Kenny and what we can expect to see from him in the future. While some can argue that Kenny's arc is simply a rehash of either Johnny, Miguel, or Hawk's arc, I still think it's cool to see someone who was completely brainwashed and trained solely by Silver. It also speaks volumes how even at earlier ages, mentors are important, and in a way, Kenny's arc also imitates both Tori's and Robby's. Two characters who had been let down by people they looked up to or trusted, only to find out in the end that they were let down by Cobra Kai. As I talked about before, I can't wait to see how Kenny's arc plays out in season 6, and I'm intrigued by how things will play out between him, Robby, Anthony, and his brother Sean now back in the fray. As Robby said, it's not too late, and there's still another way. Unfortunately, the one person behind why Kenny is corrupted is Terry Silver. Payne applied a lot of teachings and mannerisms from his sensei, as Scary Terry was bent on revenge and power while using Cobra Kai to achieve both of those.